get captions. One second, let me pull up my document. And then I'll share screen. Okay, so we are gonna do lab 7 in this class, and then we'll talk about some of the next few things that we're gonna work toward, like your certification practice tests and things like that. So in this chapter, chapter 5 is a little long. This is one of the hardest area in IT support, only because you have variations of problems that you deal with, especially from the configuration side. So as I told my class yesterday, if this is easy, if everyone could do it, I don't think IT people would have a job, and IT people would always be in demands because, you know, computers need to be repaired and things get broken and things needs to be reconfigured. So that's why this area is highly demanded. So entry level for IT, you often deal with a lot of problems. For CompTIA A+, you must know all of these steps. They are going to ask you many questions regarding troubleshooting steps. So first, we need to recognize the problem. A lot of the times that's going to come in from ticketing system. They would use various ticketing system to, you know, so if I am a client and my computer is down or my server is down, I would send you a ticket, and based on the priority of the ticket, you would have different level of priority like high, medium, or low. So the high one you would address first. So you would then identify the problem. After that, you would search for possible cause. And this is a difficult area. There are many things that could go wrong. So when your computer doesn't start, that could be many things, right? Is your power connected? Maybe, you know, possible that power supply is dead. Other issues that could go wrong. So you need to ask many questions. The more detail you have, the easier it is for you to narrow down the cost. I told some students earlier that I normally write down the type of problems that I come across, even the model number and the type of system that I work with. And then once I find the solution, I would make a note of it. So in case I come across it again, I don't have to research it. We're not going to have solution for everything, and you must accept that. Sometimes the solution is beyond you. So we are going to try our best to fix a lot of the problem. So once you already kind of identified the possible cause, you are going to test your theory and then be able to solve it. Okay. So troubleshooting skill is highly demanded. So you need to list that on your resume, right? In this class, after this class. And then after that, if we narrow down the solution for our problem, we would implement it. So the purpose of this lab is to kind of give you some of the common issue and how to fix some of that problem from the OS side, right? The hardware, when you have hardware that goes wrong, the only way that you can test the hardware is with a known good device. So if I have a bad monitor, how can I tell, right? If the client tells me, oh, my monitor is black and I can't see anything, but my computer is on. So how can you test that? You would test it with a good monitor, right? So ask them if they have a TV or another screen that they can plug in. And then if you show up, like, you know, as a technician, you have to bring a known good device to test. And that's how you test. So I always, 2 areas that you need to make sure. Physical, test that first. And then the logical or the configuration or the software side, test it after. So those 2, usually it goes hand in hand. So once you already have the solution, you need to document the problem. So now let's go through this, and you please feel free to type out your answer with me. So For part A, we're gonna identify some of the common issues in PC. And these are the things that the book mentioned, and you can find this online, and you know, this also comes from my experience. So when you have a slow performing operating system on the computer, some of the major things that you need to focus on, first, we want to see if it's a malware. And if you ask the user information, you will find out. A lot of it, you know, comes from these areas. So malware, how you fix it is to be able to use your AV or antivirus or security application to be able to scan. A lot of the times you can't remove anymore. Most of the malware in the current day, it impact your registry or your system files. And if you remove it, it will corrupt the system. So normally we would quarantine it. Quarantine a malware doesn't mean that it goes away. It's just not impacting other files. Okay. So we would use the software tool to be able to control it. And for most people, anti-malware scan should be ran on the daily basis if they use that regularly. So malware would also slow down your computer big time. The second thing, this is common for everybody, including on your smartphone. If you have too many apps running, your system is going to slow down. Remember that software uses your internal storage or your RAM. It uses power, so it uses resources that can be taken up, which slows down your operating system. Okay. So a lot of running apps will also be a good cause. Now, slow performing can also be seen at the beginning. So when you start up the computer or when you have too many tasks starting. So let's say that someone had set up where there are all these processes that are running at the beginning, and all of these processes are hanging. It's not able to release the processor or the core for other tasks. And so that's going to create a domino effect on the other processes that are queuing. So how can you really detect this, right? You should take a look at your startup tasks. You can also go to Task Manager on Windows PC to be able to look at what kind of processes related to specific tasks. And all of your management console, you can right click your Windows button and you will be able to see Task Manager there and all your console for management in Windows there. So too many startup processes will create problem. Now, coming back to the first item, malware can also generate a lot of different type of processes like contacting server. So one of the things that Trojan likes to do is it likes to send out details to other server, especially like the keylogger. So whatever that you type, it would generate a stream of what you type and continuously send that out. So malware would hog up all your processing. And that's also what you can see in your task manager. If you're using hard drive, your fragmentation can be an impact. So if your disk is fragmented, that means that it writes file across different spaces. And in order to pull those files for application or for use, it's gonna need to go to different area. And if it's too fragmented, it's gonna slow down. So you can use this cleanup, or in the newer Windows, that's called optimization. In Windows 7, that's called defrag. But this cleanup, I normally use that first, and you can just search for it, and it's gonna pop up. So I clean it, and then I would optimize it. So when you optimize the disk, it puts the files more closer together. because your disk is dynamically writing. What that does is it's just throwing it to areas that's most available. When you optimize it, it's going to organize it to the closer areas so it can map it quicker to pull up your files. Okay? Any questions? So those are some of the common things you often see with slow performing. Now, if you turn on the PC and it's not booting, there could be a lot of different areas. Okay? So boot priority can be a big thing. So if you have it boot to USB or other drive, right? It would show press any key to start boot from DVD or USB. So what you can do is you can go into your boot sequence in BIOS, or you can go to UEFI and change that. Okay, I think the newer Windows uses UEFI instead of BIOS. And BIOS, to access that, you would press a function key depending on the manufacturer. Hello. If you have a corrupted file system, it will not boot, right? This is often the case. So and that can be impacted by malware, or it's just, when it writes the file system, it's not fully written correctly. So corrupted file system. Or people delete files that are important to file system, like system 32 files. So you can use startup and repair tool, and you can use SFC, which is system file checker tool. Now, most of you, if you ever gone through system restore with Windows PC, this process takes a long time, and sometimes it doesn't work. Okay, I'll show you in a little bit on where you can create a repair disk for your system, your Windows PC. I've done that for my non-credit class. You just need a good size USB, 4 gig and up, and then you can create a bootable USB to fix your problem. Now, I know that some malware also destroy system files, right? Like your rootkit would do that. Even some Trojan would go in and delete some of the, actually some worm would also delete some of the OS file. So when you have incorrect boot order, you don't have to write verbatim, right? I want to make sure that you are clear. So I put it's pretty wordy. So we already talked about changing the priority boot order. That's kind of related to boot priority up here. So we want to boot to the drive that has your OS. C, right? So we would point to the hard drive that stores your active partition, which is your OS. If your drive is not detected in BIOS, right? And sometimes if you upgrade from a hard drive to a solid state drive on your system and you don't check your setup, you're not able to run your installation. Or even if you install and somehow it's not detecting, it's not going to be able to connect your drive. So make sure that we check the physical connection of the drive, right? The drive needs. So for SATA drive, it needs power cable and data cable. We saw that in the prior lab. And if everything is connected physically, we need to check BIOS. Okay, make sure that it sees the model number and the type of drive there. I'll show you in a little bit on what that looks like. You can also look at device manager on OS if you're able to see OS. But in this case, we're not able to see OS. So check your physical connection, your motherboard, and check your drive on BIOS. For Windows PC, if it is a malformed master boot record, your MBR. So master boot record is a type of partition that we can use to section the drive for C, which is for our operating system or for other storage. But if for some reason, and I know that some worms would love to wipe out MBR, so it would destroy the master boot record. That's how it can disable some of the boot mechanism, and it's been around for many years now, right? So if the master boot record is missing, you're gonna get a black screen and it's gonna say MBR is missing. This is actually not a difficult fix. You would need to have a boot drive. So I would use my repair USB boot drive. Set it up to boot to USB, or if you want to use DVD, if you have an optical drive, you can. And it needs to rewrite the master boot record. So Windows use MBR to refer to what section of the drive to boot from, right? So when you install OS, just like you saw with Linux, it has a small portion that's dedicated to the boot, okay? So Linux uses grub and Windows uses MBR or GPT, but MBR is where it's gonna reference. It's kind of like, this is my analogy, right? I'm gonna use the house because everybody knows what that looks like. So if there's no MBR, right, a person, if it would be basically wipe clean of memory on how to enter the front door of the house or how to access certain room in the house. With the MBR, we would know which room is the living room, which room is the bedroom, etc. So the system really refers to that to really understand where the operating system actually lives and boot from, okay? So without that, your OS will not work. So here, kind of to fix that, you can use a third-party tool like Mini Partition, or you can just simply create a boot disk and be able to boot from it. If your partition is not marked active, which is kind of a rare situation, but when you're looking at your C drive in your disk management, your C drive is marked as an active partition. There's only going to be one section of the drive that can be active at a time for the OS, right? Even when people create a dual boot system, you can only boot one OS at a time, like either Windows or Linux, or I can have many different versions of Windows, like 4 in the case of MBR. I can only have one active at a time. And then ultimately, your hard drive or your solid state drive is damaged, right? More on the hard drive side. So when you start hearing noise, like if it's like a little whiny, like screeching noise sometimes, you might have a head crash. So if the drive is physically damaged, you have to replace the drive. And as you replace the drive, you have to reinstall OS, okay? So the primary storage is going to be the drive, and that's where OS is going to live. And so without that, you can't access the operating system. Any question regarding part B? So a lot of the things, right? Boot for OS, active partition where the OS lives, the physical drive where the OS lives. Make sure that you check the physical connection to the drive, right? Make sure that the boot is intact. If you can boot the operating system, a lot of the things that we can fix with configuration is fairly simple. The hard part is just, sometimes things don't start. So we can't really see what potentially would be wrong. So I would start with the physical check of the drive and then work my way toward the boot and then work my way toward the partition configuration of the OS or where it's installed. Okay. So always think about the logical steps and how you start and end your troubleshooting, because sometimes if you start in the middle, it doesn't make sense, right? Like you can't, if you trying to fix the boot and it's not the real problem, it's actually just a cable or the power to the drive that got disconnected somehow. So just think about the logical process. So start with the physical and work your way up toward the software side. Any question? Okay, I know it's a lot of typing, right? So this is a modified lab from prior class. I modified some steps because just for the purpose of not using virtual machine and be able to look at some of the tools that we can use today, but I'll talk a little bit more about this. Okay, so blue screen of death, known as your BSOD. This used to be just a screen with a bunch of code and write text, right? But now you see a little sad face also. Blue screen of death still exists. Windows failed to boot, and it's when you do this, basically it crashes. And this is, you know, very common in PC. A lot of times it's application related. Okay. So some things like buffer overflow, when you have when an application require more than the memory that's allocated for it, it's going to generate, you know, a bunch of error. So that you're going to see that too. Sometimes that could also relate it to the driver library, your device driver. It's not able to communicate or utilize your device at the low level through the software, which is the driver. So driver is really a software for the system to communicate with the actual hardware components at the low level. And it could also be your hardware components, such as RAM. Okay. So this is what you do when this happens, right? Look at the screen. Sometimes it's going to give you an error code. Write down the error code. If it doesn't give you the error code, because no matter what you do, you have to restart. Okay. It won't let you continue, right? So when people have the blue screen of death, there might be in the middle of an application, like a finance application, they're filling out some stuff for their customer and it crashed. Likely that they're going to lose data and they're going to be upset. That happens a lot. Okay. So you're going to have to know that when people see this, that's going to be what you're going to have to deal with. So you tell them to restart their computer, right? And then you can go in to see the temporary storage to see if you can recover some data, but likely they're not going to be able to recover some of the working active application data. So we are going to reset the power. We want to check the RAM. We also need to check your drive cables. And we need to make sure that our drivers are updated. Sometimes you also need to roll back the driver for the device and check BIOS. Okay. So restart's the first step, and I normally check RAM. So there is a way that you can do a RAM check, because now I think on the new Windows, it actually tells you that you want to scan your RAM and make sure. Okay. Because in the case that it's not writing to the memory module or the stick, it's not able to retrieve that. Okay. We're going to see some of this in a little bit. I'll explain what memory address when we look at power configuration. Any question? Okay. So we talked a little bit about black screen earlier. So when people call me and they say, oh, my screen's black, I always tell them, is your power button pressed, right? Is it connected to power? That's the first thing you should ask. So it could be that it is corrupted video driver. I should add video driver. You should update the video adapter driver. Also loose cable. So we need to check two cables, the power cable and the data cable, right? The data cable is to the monitor, your HDMI or your display port cable, or, you know, if you go old school, your VGA or your DVI. But likely it's the power cable. So we are going to reconnect the cables to the display adapter. Even if it's connected, I always unplug it and plug it back. You got to make sure, because if you didn't plug it in and someone else plug it in, they could plug it in wrong. So reconnect the cable, check the physical connection, and then update your driver or check your driver. Okay? Because how are we going to check the driver we cannot see, right? So check your cable first, and if it's simply a power cable, which tends to be the case, right? Or your data cable, your display adapter cable, then you just plug it in, restart, and then see if it's connected. On the VGA, you have to reboot, okay? The old one with the screw on the side, the blue, and the DVI. On the HDMI, you plug it in and it should be able to connect, send signal. Any question? Okay. So, hey, we're on part B. So I had to modify this a little bit because you guys cannot do the hibernation off. But if you have your computer, you can also turn the hibernation off, especially on the laptop. So in part 2, you are going to open up PowerShell. You can run it directly on the system that you're on. Type. So don't run it as administrator, just open it. Just open it? Yeah. I forgot to tell you guys, you can't do, they stopped allowing you to run as administrators. Just click it open. You don't have to run it as administrator. Okay. So mine opens up like this, and it has all the help feature for the commands, which is cool because if you need help, you can find it there. I'm just going to go ahead and close this part so we can see. Let me see if I can change my view. Okay. So what we're going to do is we are going to look at, so the first thing that you should check is your power configuration, and you guys can do this in settings, right? This is my fancy way of showing you the admin side of the house. You know, if you go into settings and then you go into your system and then go down to power, you should be able to see right here, right? So basically you're accessing your power mode information, but a lot of the times if the system is in hibernation or they're in a certain mode, it's really hard to wake it up, right? So you don't need to run it as administrator, just open it, okay? Then you are going to do a query. So when you in PowerShell and command prompt, you can do power CFG. Okay, so we're going to type in power CFG /query. Power CFG /query. This allows you to look at the configuration for power. Now, looking at this, you're like, what the heck is going on? I'm going to talk. So these have all the power profile. So earlier, right here, you see balance right here, right? It's listed right here, right? So so all of these power configuration, it's stored to a location of the system. And the address of that is right here, the starting address and the ending address. So my analogy to the students earlier is that It's kind of like there's an entire street of houses, and some of the houses would store some information. So the system is going to go to these addresses to be able to retrieve information for that power profile, right? Balance. Then, and it tells you where that is. So this is on the hard disk. This is on it's using Internet Explorer and so on. So when you let your system go to sleep, let's say that I'm downloading, right? And I'm watching YouTube video, and somehow I just let my computer go, and then eventually it goes into hibernation, right? It has all of those applications running. But when I wake it up, how does it know to be able to pull up all of the things I was using before it went to sleep? It's because it goes back to these addresses to be able to pull it. Okay, so you see those there? These are that's where it's able to retrieve all the settings for the power and the location for low power savings, for, you know, sleep, etc. Okay, so you see this address right here, right? That's the storage location where it's going to be able to retrieve that. Okay, so this gives you all the power profile, hibernation, after hibernation, before. So it takes a snapshot of what you're using, save it, and then when you wake it up, like let's say I press an enter key to wake up my system, it's gonna go and it's gonna pull that information after, and it's gonna revert it back and have all my application back to where it was. So that does cause the slowdown on our system. Oh, sorry. Okay. So I took this off, but so in PowerShell, you can't do this here because you don't have administrator privilege. Okay. But if you turn hibernation off, it actually speeds it up a little bit because it does release some resources. Okay. So I think I modified for you guys, didn't I?
Power CFG/list.
Yeah. So when we do the list, you're getting what? The summarized version of this, right? Instead of the detail, like what you've seen in the query, you're getting just a list of your settings. But it has more, okay? It has more. When you do the query, it has additional settings for your power scheme compared to what you see as lists. So lists are the active ones, okay? So if I'm gaming, I would have high performance profile for my power because, you know, my processor would use more power. So I would need to switch that to the profile. Balance, it's going to, you know, supplement it wherever that's needed. And then power saver, right? When you're not using the screen so much, it would dim the screen, just like how you would see with your smartphone. So all your system, not just Windows PC, has this option. Okay. Any question? Yeah.
What's the difference between PowerShell and CIS-25?
So PowerShell have additional functions that you see right here on the right side. Like, you know, how we did add, get, set, etc., where command prompt doesn't. Command prompt is the earlier version of the command line for Windows. It was to replace DOS. And then they supplemented, they added the PowerShell for administration purposes. So you can run function-based type of command. Yeah. So like, see how on the right side, we're able to do more on the PowerShell. Like you can set preferences and all of that. Anything that you can click and point on the graphical user interface, you can do on PowerShell. But command prompt, you cannot. There's some of it you can, but you cannot do a lot of the configuration on the higher level with command prompt. Okay. You can also run scripts in PowerShell. it is C shell. So, but in Linux and Mac OS, there's only terminal. Okay, any questions? The difference between list and query, we see, right? This gives you the active power scheme profiles compared to query. It gives you everything. It details. And then we can look at the last time it waked. So if you're using PowerShell, you can also go into here and type in the command and it will give you the options. So we can do a power CFG / last wake. So here what we can say is it's gonna give you the count on whether it was, you know, it went into hibernation, it was last awake.
Wait history count 0.
Yeah, then that's none. That means that it doesn't have any record. So if you have more than one, the reason why we check this is a lot of the times we use this also for LAN wake. You can wake up all your system via the network for like updates and installation. But hibernations in general does slow it down a little bit, so you can turn it off. So I made a note of that, and I made a note of that, and I would add it back. I would update this particular document for you later. Okay, so you want to turn that off. Here, if you try that, it's gonna throw an error because you don't have system admin. So number 3, I'm sorry you can't do some of this, but I want to show you this so that way if you want to, you can do it at home. So your system create a section on the actual SSD or your hard drive to be able to use it as memory. This is what your computer or Windows system call page file. It is a way to kind of revert back into some of your settings quickly. So if we do this here, you're not going to be able to see much because you're not a system admin. So if I'm on settings, and you can, you know, click here or just type in settings. And then if you go into system, and then if you scroll down to about, there is advanced settings, but you can't, if you click on it, they ask you for your credential because you are not a system admin. So you can't see the rest. So that's why I highlighted this list. So if you want to try to check that at home, you can. This has been around for a long time. It just, the way that they name it between Windows 7, 10, and 11 is slightly a little different. But you can change your virtual memory size and make it lower and use then the recommended size. So that way it would allow you to make your system a little faster. It's just that way you just shrinking the page file size. So that's just a dedicated section of the drive that it uses as temporary storage. Okay. So that's how you would be able to do that. So you can't really do much of step 3 using the computer here. But we can also do step 4. So if you go into settings, you can click on apps. And the startup apps is actually on the bottom. But on the newer Windows, it actually tells you all of the things about the apps that you need to see, because the way that they design the new Windows is really like a mobile platform. So if you click on startup, right, and you can check on which one is on. Okay. So here there are a few things that are turned on, but when you work with clients, you would see that a lot of the times, and even if your laptop, you can check. Laptop out of the box, it comes with a lot of bloatware like games, sometimes Xbox stuff. Sometimes I know that they also have that here. And you can remove them and you can also turn them off because those just take up processes and resources. so we can check on which one is on. So for step 4, when you look at the apps in the startup, you can see the programs that are on. Those are the programs that are gonna be launched at the start of your system. And the more you have, the slower your computer would be. Okay, so look at those. So I have Autodesk Access Core. So that's 1. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 apps, not too bad. How many programs are highly impacted? It shows the impact here, right? If it's highly impacted, so this one is low impact, this one is low impact, so, and this one is not measured for Microsoft Teams. Yeah, I would turn Teams off also. There's only one that's high impact for me, which is Autodesk Access Core. Yeah. But yeah, so look at your computer at home to see, because everybody's computer is a little bit different, right? So you can take a look at which one is high impact. If that one is not needed, you can turn it off, right? And then you that doesn't mean that it goes away. It just doesn't activate when you turn your computer on. Because if it does, it's just gonna hog up all your resources when it's high impact. Okay. You can toggle it on or off. So let's say that I'm just gonna turn Microsoft Teams off. Or some of the other ones. And then it pops this up because you're not the system admin. Yeah, we don't have much privilege as a user, so, but that's good. Their security system is working, right?
That's a little different, because ours is how many startup programs.
Yeah. So if you want to look at the ones that are already disabled, you can, but I don't think you can disable the low impact ones.
So
Yeah.
you click it.
Yeah. So you can just put none because no privilege. So we can say none. No privilege. To configure. But as if we own the system at home, you can definitely do that, right? Okay. Then what we're gonna do next is we are gonna look for services. This is a really important area in IT and cybersecurity because, you know, on servers or on desktop, we want to see what's activated. A lot of the things are tied to, you know, connectivity, resources. So if you search for services, you are going to open up your services console or the app. It's going to look like this. And everything is alphabetized. So RCCD has the stuff that's shown here that's running. Some of the things are manual. That means that you can, if you are the system admin, you can turn it on or off. Depending on certain type of service, some service the user can turn on or off, but most of the time it's your system admin. So we are going to click on the startup type and search by its category. So come back here. Sorry, let me see if I can pull this. The startup type is right here. If you click this, it's going to sort it by that column. And it's going to put all the automatic ones first. Okay. So when you deal with automation, you want to take a look at the services to see what's activated to be automatic. A lot of the things the OS require things to be automatic, like obtaining IP address as a DHCP client, that's obvious, right? A lot of the things like for, monitoring system, some of the things that your components, your hardware components use are automatic. So here we would see that there's Adobe, because it's A, it's gonna be listed first, right? So if you need to search for something, you can also sort it based on the column. So that's what you did there. So we can identify the 3 type of services that would be automatic. Then we can roll down and we can look for Microsoft Sign-In Assistant, and then you can see if you can start it. I tested this yesterday just to make sure because, it's different on my system compared to this, but I tested it here. Okay. So I'm going to sort it by name and then scroll down to M for Microsoft. Right here. Accounts. So it's actually Microsoft Account Sign-In Assistant. That's basically a service that would help you walk you through the sign-in process, right? It's turned off right now. So the whole point in this is you can start that service, right? It's even though it's running and it says manually triggered, you see, you can go start here or all tasks and then start. Okay.
Mine is grayed out.
It's yours grayed out. Okay. It won't let you click start.
Maybe it's already enabled.
It should allow you to, you can,
I already pressed it.
oh, okay.
I didn't press it.
Um,
Now it's grayed out.
Yeah. So sometime if it's already triggered, yeah, maybe yours is already triggered. That's okay. Yeah, there's not a lot that we can turn on as, let me see. Yeah, a lot of the things they had disabled for us. I know one of the biometrics one, it also allows the client to, or the user to turn it on. So, I'm sorry? It just activated as started. So here, I'll come back to mine. So after I started, right? Once I trigger it, start is no longer an option for me. It should, if you're a system admin, you should be able to stop it after that, right? But we can't. So once you start trigger it, it's gonna gray out the start and it would show start, trigger start. So once I trigger it, it's not gonna let me restart it, right? But I can't stop it because I'm not a system admin. But ultimately, I want to show you guys that, you can turn things on and off if you have the privilege to do that. So what changes occur on the service list? Nothing much, right? But on some services, if it's manual like this, if you turn it to start, it's gonna show you that it's already enabled. It shows enable after you start it. Okay. So let's answer that. service can be stopped after started. Start is no longer an option. If service is manual, it will show as enable. Should be can be stopped. Sorry. But you saw that if it's a trigger start, it just shows that it started and you can only stop or pause it, right? It doesn't show anything else. But if it's manual or disabled, it would show as the enable. Okay. So sometimes services can also cause your system to be slow, right? So now we know where to go to disable our services. Okay, that's important to think about. And then when you're being attacked, you know where to go to stop the services. But the best thing to do is disconnect the cable from the network. Whatever that server is being attacked, unplug the cable. Unplug the system and you're done. Well, you're not done. You just stop it from spreading. All right. Setup, backup, and recovery. I originally have you guys do a backup for this. We will do something else with the VM, but I want to show you where you can create backup. It's a really good practice to back up your system to the cloud and also the external storage. So we're going to open up one of our best friend, which is Control Panel on Windows. So search for Control Panel for Part C. And you might have the small icon view like this, right? You can change your view to category. I wrote it under category view. So click view by, click category. And then what you're going to do is you're going to select system and security. So go here, click here. Everything that you need for your system is here. Okay. So backup and restore, it says backup and restore Windows 7. That will be here. You can click either one, but if you click this, it's going to take you here. Earlier, I mentioned that, you know, how we can create a USB repair disk. This is where, okay? It's you have to probably need about 8 gig USB or higher. You know, that works. That only costs a few dollars. You can just go through this and then it asks you to plug in the USB. And what it does is it actually writes some of the boot files and the install file onto the repair disk. So it's always good to have a Windows repair USB. And then make sure you label it so that way you have it with you in case you need to fix. You can also create a system image. So if you click Setup Backup, it's going to ask you for the credential, but it shows here that my system has not been backed up. Right? So when was it last backed up? Never. Which is a bad thing, right? So if you ever want to know when the system was last backed up, you go here and you look, it should show right here, right? You can, when you click this, if you're the system admin, you can create a schedule for your backup. I normally back up my stuff like when I'm not using my computer. So if it's like Sunday night or Saturday night when you're out and about, you can set it up or, you know, you leave it on and the minimal amount of service and change to the system is the better time to do the backup. And now Windows doesn't let you back up internally, so you have to send it to another drive or get an external hard drive and you can just back it up there. Okay. Now expect that when you restore from your backup file, because it's a BKP file, it takes a little bit of time to pull it back. Okay. You know, all that stuff that happened with MGM and all of those things, all of their IT team and security team have to pull all of the backup for even the slot machines, everything, right? To get it back to the restored state. That takes a long time. Okay, take a screenshot. Then we're gonna look at updates. So once we're in control panel, click the first part here to go back to the original control panel option. Then you are gonna click on programs and then programs and features. And then on the left side, you would see view install updates on the left, tiny on the left. It's gonna take you to settings and it says that no updates found. But if you have updates, it's gonna tell you when it updates. It's really important that people run updates, even though people say a lot of bad things about Microsoft updates. But updates are aimed to close security gaps, okay? Even on your Android phone, your PC, your Mac OS updates, because that minimizes the vulnerability of your system for, potential issues, okay? So it shows that my system never have any updates. So there's no update, no updates. Okay. And with that, we cannot see known security updates. And if you take my security class, I'll show you where all of that is documented so you can actually track which updates has which security patches. When is the most recent security updates? No recent updates. So what they do here is they actually just have an image that reverts back when you restart, so it doesn't save anything. Occasionally IT team, like at the end of the semester, they would update the image itself and then distribute it for all the systems, so that way it's more centralized. Is that the best practice? Probably not, but always test your updates before you update on the network environment. But your system, you should do regular updates. Okay. All right. Next, we're gonna remember earlier we talked about defragmentation in the first part, right? All of this is, I wrote it to be really aiming back to what we were talking about, the common problems at the beginning. You guys notice? So all of the things that we're doing pointing back to the first part. So now we're gonna look at the defrag. So when you search for defrag, you're going to see the option defragmentation and optimized drive. You're gonna click on it. The Windows 11 is only gonna give you the optimized option. You can't analyze much here, but it shows me that I'm okay, right? On my solid state and my hard drive. Even if you have an SSD, it's always good to analyze your SSD and optimize it on flash technology, okay, or HDD. So what we see here is the C drive was last analyzed. It shows September 13. And if you haven't done this before, it's gonna say nothing here, never analyzed, right?
We're going for the time.
Oh, you don't have to. You don't have to. We're not doing forensic in this class. So. Forensic, they have to put it down to the minute. Yeah, because 1-2 minute can change something. Yeah. Yeah, you just put the date. So when was other drive analyzed? So I have the hard disk drive was about 2 weeks later, so 9/27. My removed drive, so it says never run. So you see different states shown here, right? So if you click on, you can't click analyze, but you can select this. And then if you click optimize, and it's going to ask you for credentials. So you can't do a lot of this here, but you can do that on your own system or when you fix someone else's system. So just take a screenshot of this so that way you remember when you look back at this assignment months from now, how that looks like. Okay. But it's always good to do this when you are not saving a lot of files to it or using your system actively. So we would optimize, analyze, and then optimize. If you want to do this cleanup, which I didn't write a portion in this, but this is where you just search for this cleanup. So I would this cleanup first and then do the optimize. So you search this cleanup, open up the app. You can select the drive that you want and then click OK. And then it's going to clean it up. So this is where you can flush out all your temp files, your recycle bin file that you deleted, right? That you empty your recycle bin. Those don't go away. See the temporary internet files, all of those things. You can clean up the overall, right? So when you do this cleanup and then optimize, that's better. Okay. Any question? All right, let's look at printer configuration. So the hardest also area for printer is printer troubleshooting. Okay. This I write the OS, but after this I'll show you a little bit. I think we have some printer in the back. So on the new Windows, if you go into settings, you go into Bluetooth and devices, printer and scanners is here. It shows the type of printers that you have installed. So printers can be added using an IP address if it's a network printer, or if you connect it directly to your system using a USB cable, that will be a local printer compared to an IP address printer, that will be a network printer. So once you click the printer, you would see that, let me go back. I have the HP right here. That's the actual printer that's installed. It's default. The other ones are software-based printer. That means I can print but make a file from it, right? Like if I wanted to convert my file into Adobe or using Microsoft XP to print out, you know, or save a file of my website or something like that. So I can use these, but actual printer is one right here.
This is going to be in the video now.
Yeah. I actually have the prior video, but we modify some steps. So yeah, it will be a video. So do not include the PDF, the document writer. So we know that it's going to be one. And you can name it. It's an HP LJ M 506. Now, if we, let me see. So if you click on the printer itself, hardware property is right here. So I was on, right? I was on the printers and scanner. I saw the printer. If you click the printer and then go to hardware properties here, and it's going to show this. So we can track to see how that events, that printer is installed and used, and all of that is under events. Yeah, so it tells you that they had the settings changed, configured, and then started. So this is the time. So August 8th. Another way that you can look at printers is through control panel. So go back to our control panel. Click on control panel. And if you're in the category view, like what you had before, you're going to click on your hardware and sound, which is the third option on control panel here. And then your devices and printer, which takes you back into settings now, right? So they pull everything back into settings now, and then click on printers and scanners. Which is where we were before. So that's another way that you can access it. So after this, if you click on the printer, I think it's already set as default, but you can't really do much to it here. So if you want that printer to be defaulted printer, that would be, you know, when they click print, that's going to be the printer that's going to spit out the pages. You can click this option, but even if I click, it's not doing anything, right? But at home, that's how you set it. Okay. Another way that you can also troubleshoot printer on OS is through Device Manager. So you can right click here or search here. So we can open up Device Manager, which is step J. Yes, I am not the administrator. So what we're going to do is we are going to right click. We're already in there. So print queues, we're going to expand the print queue option. So go to print queue, click the arrow. And the same thing that you see on settings is there, right? And then what you're going to do is you're going to right click the printer that we looked at and look at its property, which is what we just saw earlier. Okay. And the same thing that you would see from earlier. So when was it configured? We already mentioned that it was August 8th. So the same answer for O as in G, because it's the same printer. Then if you're in here already, sorry. I lost track of, okay. So we answer this. If you click on the settings tab and then click devices printers folder. So coming back here, go to settings tab. If you click this, it takes you to what we used to see as on control panel. So the check mark is actually the active printer that's installed. That's set default for your system. And then you're going to double click that printer. And this is where you would see all the things. So whenever that people have a problem, they're like, oh, I click my document 5 times to print, and I'm not able to see it print. You would click the printer icon, or you would go into the printer queue folder and it would show here, right? So if there's pending files that to be printed, it would show up here. And in the case that you have error or pending, you also see the little printer icon in the system, in the system tray. This is called the system tray. Okay. But I don't have any error, so I don't see that there. Okay. All right. Any questions? So what's your printer status? Yep. So your printer status information, the state is default and the status is in queue. Right here. Look at right here, in queue. Okay. So as service technician, you are gonna deal a lot with printer issues. A lot of them are laser printer, sometimes copier. There are companies that specifically service just printers and machines like Xerox company. So if you're dealing with the laser, I think your book goes into attention. There's a whole chapter that's dedicated to printers. Okay. This cartridge, sometimes when it says low toner, what you do is if you want to test it, because sometimes it generates low toner error, it's not gonna print, right? You guys gonna see this, the icon with the dot for the toner. You take out the toner, you rotate it a few times, okay? This is just gonna slide in. So if you look back, sorry, I can't move it up. Okay. So to open it, you simply, there's a button that shows the toner icon on it, on the side or on the top. You press it and it pops up and you slide it out. Most of the HD laser, and a lot of the lasers like that. This, right, gets inserted by sliding it in the side like this. And then what you do is you slide it in. Be able to and back up. But if it's blinking, you see how this one is low toner. If it's blinking like this, take it out, rotate it, and then plug it back in. Okay? On the desk jet, which is what you have at home. You guys know how to brace toner, I'm sure, right? A lot of times you're gonna run into tray issues. Okay? Take your tray out and then be able to check your roller. Many times printer have issues with roller because over time when you print, the roller gets dirty. So take a vacuum, clean up the dust around the roller or clean up the roller, that's gonna help. So troubleshooting printer is like, you know, it pays the money every single time for a lot of the service technician. Sometimes feeding tray gets stuck. These printers are really made to be used to sell ink cartridges. Okay, printers are really cheap, ink cartridges is expensive. So that's the industry for printing is that's what it is, but now most of the time we do things digital now, so you see all-in-one scanner printer, feeding trays get jammed. They're made with a little bit less quality material. And then your ink cartridges don't last as long as well because the printing devices are really made to sell ink for most part. The laser printers, the ink are really expensive. Some of them are individual ones for the, and then some of them are like the tricolor. So your book talk about that. So outside of troubleshooting your driver and your configuration, so you can install your driver. See how there's troubleshooting option. You can also remove property. You can add the driver for the printer and set it as default. But ultimately, your printing devices, a lot of the time it's mechanical issues that's gonna cause the problem. Okay, so you're welcome to check out some of the printer. I think I brought in some of the old ones, so you can even open it up and take a look. In my opinion, I think, unless it's a really big laser printer that costs thousands and thousands of dollars, after the warranty, a lot of times the company, they just replace the printer. But if you want to work for a company that looks for technician that service printer, Xerox, Ricoh, even Minolta, they do a lot of, like Minolta they hire for, like those photo center, they're not around as much anymore, but you do see them like at FedEx, UPS, and things like that. So they print on the larger roll, for posters, for, calendar, bigger type of printers. Those are a little bit different. A lot of them are laser based because, it's high definition printing, and so on. But, the DeskJet and stuff like that, most people don't send in for repair anymore because the service cost is, more than actual printer itself. I'm sure you can get one for like $100 or less for wireless printer and be able to use the printer. Any questions? Okay, so let me stop the video.